안녕하십니까. 오늘 또 이른 아침에 이렇게 많이 나와주셔서 대단히 감사합니다. 그럼 제가 관리에 따라서 영어로 회의를 진행하도록 하겠습니다. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The global economic power balance has been shifting rather rapidly during the last couple of decades. Although the U.S. economy still is dominant, there are debates about whether the U.S. will continue to dominate the world economy in this century. This morning we are very fortunate that we have Sorman, who was with us a number of times before, will share his very strong view on this very particular specific issue, with the title of whether the U.S. economy will continue to dominate the world economy in this century. I don't think Sorman needs a long introduction to this audience, since he was here before, and he is known so well in Korea. He is a very well-known French journalist, economist, philosopher, and author. He has written many books, and some of them are translated and well sold in Korea. He has written recently books on China and India and many other interesting subjects. He has been preaching for the ideals of modern capitalism and creativity and so forth. Some people consider him what he called the neo-conservative. I don't know. It would be very interesting for you to ask him whether he would like to be described as a neo-conservative author. But in any case, as I said, he will share his view on the very issue of whether the U.S. will continue to dominate, U.S. economy will continue to dominate the world. As you recall, Lester Thoreau, some time ago when he wrote his book titled Head to Head, he argued that Europe will own the 21st century, not U.S. or not Japan. Of course, he had various reasons for his argument, and many people nowadays think his argument may not be proved to be correct. But in any case, please welcome Sorman. Please join me. Welcome.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, I'm not a neoconservative because I think neoconservative is really rooted in the US tradition. Neoconservatism is so much connected with American history, American values, and also American religion. Being fair, I have nothing for it or against it. I've tried in many of my books and writings to analyze what neoconservatism is about. And I'm a French scholar, and in France we don't have this tradition of neoconservatism. for many reasons. One of the reasons is that religion is not extremely influent in the political and intellectual life of France. So I just see myself as a classic liberal, which is a long economic, intellectual, and political tradition starting in the 18th century, and which I modestly try to pursue, illustrated by remarkable scholars like Tocqueville in the 19th century or Raymond in the 19th century. So, neoconservative for us is something a bit exotic. If we shift now to the subject, what I try to not demonstrate but illustrate this morning, that the reasons why the United States economy is a leading economy since more than 1 century now, these reasons are still there, and strongly there, and I don't see these fundamental reasons as being threatened in the coming years. And I will explain why. I will quote 9 items to make things more simple and clear. And also in the second part, more rapidly, and I hope we can discuss about it, I will compare the advantages of the United States vis-à-vis the emerging advantages of new continents like China, Brazil, India, and the situation of the European Union. But from the beginning, I say very clearly that my hypothesis for the lead of the discussion is that the US are ahead, still ahead, and I don't see why they would lose their place in the coming years. The strength of the United States, of course, you know this country certainly as well as I do. And there will be no surprise in my conference, but maybe I will give you a different view on things you already know. The first item, and the fundamental reason why it's a booming economy and a dynamic economy, that the United States is the land of what the economist Schumpeter called destructive creation. What is destructive creation? When a company doesn't work, is not profitable anymore, and is not promising, it is destroyed to be replaced. This is an attitude towards innovation which you do not find in Europe. When a company or an activity is threatened by innovation or competition, the spontaneous reaction in Europe will be to protect and subsidize the company and try to keep it going for as long as possible. So the American attitude is reversed. First you destroy the company and then you build a new one. And the argument of Schumpeter is that the United States was a very creative economy because it was a destructive economy. From outside, foreigners will say, look, the companies are going bankrupt, Pan American has disappeared, and a major company like Wong has disappeared, they were leaders in informatics, and the other companies are taken over by foreigners in the automobile industry. From an American perspective, that's good. If they are bankrupt, it's because they deserve to go bankrupt. So there is no nostalgia, neither any political or economic investment in keeping at all price through protection and subsidies companies which are always perceived as being temporary and not part of the landscape forever. Of course, I won't go into detail, but this notion that the creative destruction has legal, political consequences. Among the legal consequences, it's important to, the US very much insists on the importance of bankruptcy law. And because it must be easy to get into business, but it must be easy also to get out of business. And if you compare the United States to other countries, and many comparisons have been made with Europe, for example, we know that it's much more easier legally and financially to build, open a new company, and it's also easier to get out of this company. So in the destructive creative process, the bankruptcy law are a key element of flexibility in the US economy. And I think it is the only economy where bankruptcy law are considered as a major instrument of economic dynamism. Bankruptcy being not perceived as a failure as such, but as a moment, as an instrument in an economic dynamism. Second item, which is more common, is that in the United States there is a strong division or wall, everything being related, between politics and economics. It is a non-politicized economy. That means that the economic decisions are usually, there are exceptions of course, they are usually made without political interference. You have lobbying, you have this kind of things, but mostly, if we look at the global picture, it is a non-politicized economy. The strategy of the enterprises are taken into consideration without any connection with politics, and also the major institutions which impact economy in the United States, legal, financial institutions, judicial institutions are independent from politics. And the best illustration of this independence is, of course, the Federal Reserve Board. The fact that the state overall have very few influence in terms of economic policy. It's very significant that there is no economy minister in the United States. And if there is no economy minister, why? Because the government doesn't consider that in a free market economy, its duty is to intervene in the economy as such. And second, if there was an economy minister, he would not have any major instrument to influence the economy. Therefore, in the institutions, you see this clear distinction between economic decision and political decision. Third item, and always competitive, which explains the competitive edge of the United States. The United States is globally a land of low taxation. If we compare once again with Europe, for example, in Europe, between 1950 and today, the percentage of public expenses, state expenses mostly, in Europe have doubled in less than 50 years. We went from less than 30% to more than 50% of public expenses in our GDP. If you look at the same figure in the United States, relatively, the public budget of the United States is today exactly the same amount as it was in 1950. It's less than 25% of the GDP. Of course, if you get into details, if you look at the composition of the budget, you don't find the same items. For example, military expenses have went down tremendously. In the 1950, military expenses were nearly half of the budget during the Korean War, for example. Today, with the war in Iraq, military expenses represent 3% of GDP. So military expenses went down, but welfare expenses went up. So welfare expenses, which were nearly inexistent in 1950, today is a major expenditure, which is a risk for the future of the budget and the future of the American economy. There are more and more political requirements, political pressure to increase the welfare budget. And also the baby boomers now entering into retirement age are asking for pensions and kind of retirement that we have in Europe and that they do not have in the United States. Therefore, in the US, this very low budget and low taxation are still there, but in the future could be threatened by a different demographics and different political requirements. It is a major threat for the public balance of the balance of the public finance in the United States. Number 4, always in terms of comparative advantage. The US have, as you know, as we all know, a very flexible labor market. It's very flexible for two reasons. First reason is you have a labor supply which is nearly infinite because of immigration. Legally or illegally, several million people join the workforce every year in the United States. half of them legally, half of them illegally, and the illegal stay. So this is a constant labor supply. Because of this constant labor supply, wages are relatively low in the United States, much lower than in Western Europe, for example. And because Social Security being very small in the United States, the taxes on labor are also very small. And this explains that many industries which are not so modern, not so high-tech, or many services which are not high-tech at all, are doing very well in the US. Even in textile, you know that many companies, or in electronics, many companies in the US have the choice between producing in the US or exporting to the rest of the world. So it's not, it's very strange, but sometime in the southern United States, for example, southern California, you have very low-tech textile industries, and you just wonder why they are not in China, among any places. But it's because the labor is so cheap, and the flexibility of the labor laws as such, there is no strong reason to deindustrialize the United States. And a lot of talks have been made 20 years ago on the deindustrialization of the United States, but this, in reality, did not occur. The US is still an industrial country. Another favorable aspect of the labor market from an economic perspective, that the workers have very low protection, so they get in and out of the market very easily. That's the name of the game, very different from Europe. It's also a country of very low conflicts. You have very few strikes, and the strikes are short, and the strikes are usually limited in some sectors, like the public transportation sector, or everybody knows, in the automobile sector. And this is why the automobile sector is the industrial sector in the US with the highest wages, and they are not really competitive. But if we take out this very peculiar sector for historical reasons, a very flexible labor market with relatively low wages and a low conflict. Number 5. In spite of all what is written on the energy dependence of the United States and increasing price of oil, the United States is not that much energy dependent, and there will be less and less. What do I mean by that? First of all, by productivity gain, the United States, like any modern country, are consuming less and less energy relatively to what they produce. The new industry, the new facility, the new kind of real estate which is being built in the United States is less and less energy consuming. One of the consequences is that the rise of oil prices since a year had no impact on the American growth. If you remember what happened in '73, and if you compare to today, the increase in oil prices in '73 disrupted Western economies. Today, no. It has practically no impact. On top of it, moreover, if prices went even more, were rising more, the United States have many possibilities for substitutions. They have oil, they have gas, which they don't use because it's really costly, or because of an environmental group opposing this exploitation. They are very much under-equipped in nuclear energy, but there are more and more debates on the construction of new nuclear facilities to produce energy in the United States. So they have a lot of flexibility as far as energy is concerned. They are not so much energy dependent, neither for the prices nor for the production. So this will not be a brake on the American economy. Number 6, the US dollar. The US dollar is, as you know, it's a huge advantage. Because for the entrepreneurs or for the borrowers, for any American, it's easy to borrow money. You have an abundant, unlimited supply of money, and the rates are relatively low because of the abundance of supply. This comes from the fact that the US dollar is the reserve currency. Now is the dollar threatened as a reserve currency, and this easiness to borrow at a relatively low price, which is one of the factors of the US economy dynamism, will it disappear or not? It could disappear, but which currency would replace the US dollar? Nobody knows. Right now, it is impossible to say that one currency, neither the Chinese currency nor the euro, are in a position to replace the US dollar. Because to become a reserve currency, you must have a long history. The markets look at the history and look at the institutions which are the ultimate guarantee of your reserve currency. The Federal Reserve Board has a long history, and the banking system has also a long history in the United States of safety. Same with the treasury bonds. In the case of the euro, the institutions are still too young. They are still controversial within Europe itself. So it's not very tempting for an investor to shift globally from the US dollar to an unknown and still unpredictable currency. And of course, this would be much worse in the case of China. So far, in spite of all, the debate on the US dollars, which is going since years and years, and the dollar going up and going down, and being completely unpredictable, it still is not threatened in its role of a global currency, and this gives a tremendous financial advantage to the American entrepreneurs. Some economists in the US consider that 1% every year of the US growth can be explained by the privilege of having the dollar as a reserve currency, because it gives access easily to the capital market, and it's a decisive help for investors. Item number 7. One of the characteristics of the US economy, which is, I think, significant today, it was not the case 25 years ago, that the monopolies are rather well accepted in the United States. The whole judicial movement against big companies and the destruction of monopolies has stopped in the early 80s. AT&T was the ultimate monopoly which was destructed by a legal judicial decision. But since the early 80s, all major companies have not suffered this kind of legal action. The best example being Microsoft. The US system considered that a company can be a monopoly in the United States, but it is not a monopoly on the global scene. Therefore, the definition of a monopoly has changed. It's very convenient, and there is no reason to destruct monopoly the way it was. It's significant that Microsoft has escaped the American justice and has fallen, or is falling, vis-à-vis the European justice. They have problem with the European Commission and the European legal system, which is forcing Microsoft to pay for a huge fine and to debungle their operations. This is a European decision, it's not an American decision. Number 8, and there are only 9, so I'm coming to the end as far as this is concerned. Number 8, maybe it's number 8, but it's the most important. It's the quality of higher education in the United States. You cannot understand the dynamism of the United States if you do not understand that this country is the leading country in producing innovation, ideas which can be transformed into economic assets. And these ideas, they don't come out of the blue. These ideas, they come out of the excellency centers of the American universities. So if I were to isolate the one single factor of the American edge in economic terms, and one factor which you don't find in the rest of the world, it's evidently the university system. The fact that this university system is very good, the fact that it is competitive, the fact that it is very expensive is very meaningful. It's very expensive because higher education costs a lot. You need to invest a lot in order to attract the best professors from all over the world and to attract the best students from all over the world. And it's a heavy investment. And it's a private investment, as you know, in most of the cases. Why are students ready to pay $50,000 a year for tuition, excluding the rest? Because they know it is the best investment in their life, and that the return on investment will be very high. And more in the case of the American economy, you can see that there is a premium on education which is increasing by the year. Many social observers in the United States say that inequality is increasing in the US. True. People at the top are making more and more money. If you wonder why they make more and more money, it's because they have invested in their education and they have a huge education premium. So in order to improve equality in the United States, what is necessary to do is not a social policy, it's not a redistribution policy, it's to invest more and more in a better education system. The universities are very good, as we know, college are not, and high schools are a disaster. There is a lot of work to be done, but this is a key factor, and I'm not sure that this heavy investment in higher education and the connection between this high investment and innovation in the US economy, I'm not sure this is well understood abroad by other countries. It's certainly understood by the students, because Korean students or French students, as soon as they can, they try to reach a US campus. Number 9, and final, one of the remarkable aspects of the American economy since, let's say, 30 years, in that in the United States you still have business cycles, but no depression. No depression. And you never can be sure. Economists don't like to make predictions, but it's very unpredictable that you will have a depression in the United States. You have business cycles which are provoked by objective reasons. For example, a significant change in technology. When you shift from the industrial sector to the innovation sector, you have an objective reason which will bring in a business cycle. When the financial sector is making mistakes, as we recently see, you have objective reason for a business cycle. A business cycle is not a depression. And if we look at the long run, I could quote the economist from Minneapolis, Edward Prescott. Prescott remarks that the growth of the United States started at the very end of the 19th century. And in fact, it is the dominant economy in terms of innovation and growth since the end of the 19th century. And if you look, if you calculate the trend, not on a yearly basis, but on a long-run basis, the trend is 2%. And 2% each year makes you very rich in 1 century. So the trend is 2%. The return on investment since 1 century is 4%. Those are the two key figures of the US economy, 2% and 4%. In the long run, no countries have been able to reach this rather sustainable and predictable trend. So those are some of the reasons why I don't see any major threat or any major change in the dynamism of the American economy. Some very rapid remark on competition. Europe. And first of all, I think to talk in terms of competition between Europe and the United States is a bit artificial. I mean, we are not at war. We share the same civilization, and many of our companies are global. So this notion of opposing country versus country in the modern global economics has not much meaning, actually, because of the interdependence, and especially in the case of Europe. It's as if you wanted to oppose France and Germany, for example. We are so much interdependent, and to oppose both countries as if they were two champions economically has not much meaning. This being said, it is true that globally, if you exclude UK, Europe is lagging behind the United States in terms of growth in terms of innovation and in terms of high education. I won't elaborate on the deep reasons of this situation. I just want to mention that the reasons are very deep. They have to do with demographics, they have to do with the way people see their future. They also have to do, and this I think is a decisive factor, with the very important welfare system that we have all over Europe. It has been decided collectively after World War II to invest massively in the welfare sector, healthcare, pension, social security. So it's a kind of a political and social choice which the United States have decided to avoid. Because of this social choice in Europe that you can approve or disapprove, it's a trade-off. You have better welfare, you have less growth. Why do you have less growth? Because in order to pay for the welfare, you have to increase taxes and you have to increase the importance of the public sector. And we know that the productivity of the public sector is much lower than the productivity of the private sector. So once again, it's a trade-off. You can't have the best of both worlds. You can't have a very good welfare system in a high-growing economy. And if you have a high-growing economy like the US, probably you have a poor welfare sector. So the choices, the collective choices have been different and the consequences have been different. European governments are doing much efforts, and it's been done in UK, it's been done by Schröder in Germany, it's been done by Prodi in Italy, it's being done now by Nicolas Sarkozy, to improve a little bit, to change a little bit, the balance between the productive sector and the non-productive sector. But what a government can do is to change the balance, to modify a little bit the line. But between a state which spends more than half of the national production, case of France, and a state like the US which spends only a quarter of its production, well, the difference, the gap, will remain enormous, Therefore, in terms of innovation, we can do a little bit better than we do, but we will still stay much behind because we have a different model. Some very short words on China and India. China is not a competitor, for nobody, I would say. China is not a competitor for Europe, neither for the United States, and China is an extremely poor country. And they started from such a low level that they have a very high growth rate, but this growth rate is not extraordinary. It's absolutely comparable to the growth rate of emerging East Asian economies in the 40s and the 50s. Nothing better than what Korea or Taiwan did in the past. So there is nothing fascinating or nothing new, I would say, about China. The only new aspect, of course, is the size. But the methods, export-oriented cheap goods, the method is well known. And this is not so far a threat for nobody. In the case of the United States, in Europe, because of China cheap production, we live much better. Consumer prices are going down. Consumer prices are going down, not only in textile and electronics, but everywhere, because every time you introduce Chinese components in the production process, you lower down your production cost. So in a way, the whole world is benefiting from Chinese low labor cost, because the Chinese low labor costs are incorporated in our cost. And one of the reasons why we don't have inflation in the West, it's because China, by providing all these very cheap goods, is keeping prices down. This is not always perceived because people see in their specific sector. If you are a textile producer in Mexico or in Bangladesh, you can be bankrupt because of China's competition. This is the name of the game. You just try to be more sophisticated than the Chinese. You have an emerging country like Turkey, which is doing very well. Turkey was heavily in textile. They are still in textile, but because of Chinese competition, they are getting into more sophisticated textile. So China is not a threat. China is an incentive. And so the growth of China is good for the Chinese, and I think it's good for the world. And I don't see any possibility China becoming a world leader in economic terms because of their poverty and because of the low level where they are right now. On top of it, China is a very unpredictable country. Institutions are not there. You don't have predictable economic institutions, you don't have property rights, you don't have an independent justice, and you have a political system which doesn't guarantee the stability of the system itself. Some Chinese say that they have been very lucky so far since Deng Xiaoping to have enlightened leaders. But the process of selection of the leaders does not necessarily deliver an enlightened leader. So you don't know what the next leaders will be. And also, in the case of China, the strategy which has been chosen, it has been chosen by the leaders. It has not been approved by the people. We don't know what the people think. So you can't say that there is an economic consensus in China. We absolutely don't know. If I compare China with India, India has a growth rate which is now exactly the same as China. China is around 10% and India is somewhere between 9 and 10%. So in terms of economic growth, they grow at the same rate. Do I see India as a threat for the world and as the next global leader? Also not. Because until they will have resolved their domestic problems, it will take at least 1 century. They are following a different strategy, they are more domestic oriented, they are less oriented toward export. It's a more stable growth, it's more decentralized, it's more based on small and medium companies, it's less disruptive for the people, and it is based on a political consensus. The Indian strategy, which has been followed now since 10 years, has been approved by all political parties. Therefore, India is very predictable. China is less predictable. But in both cases, you have two poor countries which must not be considered as a threat to the global order, at least in economic terms. And what did I want? Well, China, India, Europe, and just one final remark. When I come in this part of the world, which strikes me is that the most important nation in this part of the world is, like never mentioned again, just next door is Japan. And so everybody is so focused on China, and now focused on India, we tend to forget that you have Japan. And it's not because Japan is a very slow growth since 10 years that Japan has become a minor economic force, and I think you can expect a Japanese comeback. And I think Japan is a major actor economically than China and India. And actually the debate on China is based largely on the kind of a cultural fascination for China, and because of the size of China. But China, for a long time to come, will remain a minor player as far as global economic forces are concerned. Thank you.